Wanted to spend a moment introducing our leader for the next session, Susan Palm. I talked a bit this morning about the fact that my philosophy for 25 plus years has been around customer and solving customer problems and providing value to our customers. I actually go so far as to say at my internal meetings, customer first, always, before our company. So the customer first, then our company, and then I have a list that goes down from there. But Susan kind of epitomizes what it is to be a champion for our customers. I'm very proud to work with Susan and call her a colleague and a friend. Susan is our Senior Vice President of Industry Solutions. She's responsible for our global customer engagement program. She leads a program to assist our customers in their GRC journey with MetricStream. The engagement program is designed to assist all of our clients to build their GRC programs and leverage their MetricStream applications to deliver value. Because as I talked about earlier, it is all about value. She's a member of our leadership team, as you know. She leads initiatives to ensure our customers' priorities and regulatory requirements are incorporated into our solution suite. Susan has over 27 years of experience as a practitioner, both as Chief Risk Executive at Sterling Bank, SVP of Op Risk at Wells Fargo. I'll go on. She's just got a very, very strong background, and absolutely everyone knows Susan as the champion for our customers. So with that, Susan, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, George. And thank you all of us. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Today we're tracking a very important topic here, and that is about aligning our GRC programs to the mission that our companies espouse and to create programs that support our commitment to performing with integrity. While most of our GRC initiatives, 5 to 8 years back, were really in response to regulatory expectations, we're really happy to see that these programs are really starting to climb up the maturity ladder and start to focus on what matters to our organizations. Today, our jobs are less black and white than they were when it was really about regulatory compliance or compliance to policies. As Michael said earlier, today we're challenged to move from the known unknowns to the unknown unknowns. And in order to do that effectively and to maintain your presence in society, it's important that we understand how we align all of this GRC work to the culture in our organization. So I'm very delighted that we have 4 very talented panelists today whose companies really embody a strong culture and commitment to their stakeholders. Each of our panelists has a significant responsibility within their own organization, and they're focused on driving programs that align with their corporate objectives. You're going to hear today how their programs have been developed and how their services and products maintain that alignment to their mission. Whether it is to maintain the integrity of our global economy, or to protect the private data of our military, or to build technologies that prevent cybercrime, or to ensure the life safety of their human being customers. So each one of them has a really big job, and we're delighted they could join us. So immediately to my left is David Friedman, Executive Director of Corporate Services at DTCC. David has been involved in the GRC space just most recently, but he has been a long member of the IT space and the program space, 20 years of developing and supporting and managing financial applications, whether it was at GFI, Lehman Brothers, in the derivatives, the equity spaces. So financial integrity in our markets has been an area that he has been focused in for his career. So he is now at DTCC, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then to David's left is Jennifer Sheets. And Jennifer has a tremendous job at Biata and has had a very integral role in developing programs and practices that have actually changed the way the company thinks in terms of how they administer health care to their members. Jennifer has pioneered a lot of these practices in the healthcare environment, bringing together advocacy and alternative approaches that really are focused on the well-being of their customers. And we're delighted, Jennifer, to have you. And then seated next to Jennifer is Vernon Emshoff. Vernon is a technical data architect and principal, an IT GRC architect at USAA. He has about 25 years of service in financial services, and the last 10 years have been focused on technical direction for compliance, risk, audit, and legal organizations. Vernon started as an architect in the AML space, and in 2011 really saw the need and the opportunity for this role of a GRC data architect, and actually coined that phrase back in 2011 and took on the mantle, understanding the importance of data and the integrity of data in a GRC program. And seated next to Vernon is Chris Rosfeld, who is the Senior Director of Privacy and Anti-Corruption and Antitrust Compliance at Western Digital. He is the Data Protection Officer and the head of the Anti-Corruption, Privacy, and Antitrust Compliance for Western Digital Corporation, a global electronic storage company with approximately 80,000 employees. Chris was the head of compliance in a previous role at Agrium, a global agriculture company with 20,000 employers. And so he's had a long career in this space as well. So the first question to David is to tell us a little bit about DTCC and how GRC works within your organization.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me. I did want to just start out by saying that, as you said, I have spent most of my career supporting business applications in support of the business lines. So when the question was asked this morning, how many of you, this is the first time at the summit, I raised my hand. So when Susan asked me to be part of this panel, I was a little hesitant. She said, "Don't worry, there won't be a lot of people."
I don't remember that.
Okay. But DTCC stands for Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, and we are a very key component in the infrastructure that supports the financial markets. The core business of DTCC, there are several, but the core business is one that processes trades that are executed on the U.S. markets. So, for example, in the equity space, on a daily basis, we will clear and settle approximately 60 million trades that have been executed on the U.S. exchanges. In terms of the fixed income side, we clear an average $3.5 trillion a day. We have a depository called DTCC that literally houses every share of every U.S. firm that there is. So we are very integral to the support of the financial markets. Someone asked me recently, is DTCC regulated? Yes. Yes, we are. We are regulated very much so by the SEC, by the Fed, by New York State, by global regulators, et cetera. And the SEC has designated DTCC as what they call a SIFMU. So I have the definition of SIFMU in front of me. A SIFMU is a systemically important financial market utility. And what that means is those are entities whose failure or disruption could threaten the stability of the United States financial system. There are 8 SIFMUs that have been named, and DTCC's 3 subsidiaries are 3 of them. So you can see the need for a heavy GRC program within our firm.
Well, thank you, David. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about Bayada.
Bayada is a home health care organization. As of last Friday, we were caring for about 904,000 patients. We had our 904,000th last Friday. We are in 22 states and 5 countries, provide everything from personal care, housekeeping, light duty, to complex home intensive care, complex pediatric intensive care in the home, and hospice services.
Thank you. And Vernon, tell us about USAA.
So USAA is coming up on its 100-year anniversary. We are a financial services provider, services and products for the military and their families. Our home office is in San Antonio, but we do have locations around the world because our military are around the world. So GRC is a very core piece, and it's growing daily of our culture of our very lives because of the trust that our members place in us to protect their assets, financial assets.
Okay, thank you. And Chris?
Great. So David just talked about, was it sick flu?
SIFMU, yeah.
Sick flu. So I have what might be the actual flu, so apologize if I don't shake your hand much during this conference, but hopefully I'll feel better tomorrow and the next day to meet more of you. So who is Western Digital? So raise your hand if you have a cell phone or a computer. You got about a 50% chance of having our device in your device. We are the largest electronic storage company in the world. We are a data technology company. We really are driving to make sure that those precious memories, those important documents, whether it's stored in the cloud or on one of your devices, we're there to help make sure that it's stored safely and for a very long time.
Great, thank you. So as you can see, we're technology, the U.S. military, people's lives, and the economy. So we've got a pretty powerful group here. So David, tell me, so how does the GRC program at DTCC support and align with your company's objectives? What are some of the considerations for your program?
Well, let me just try to answer it this way. The mission statement of DTCC is securing today and shaping tomorrow. That's the mission statement. And if you look on our website, there's also a promise statement which talks about being at the forefront of innovation to mitigate risk and create market efficiencies and reduce costs. So to me, those things, if viewed in a certain way, can be contradictory. How can we ensure stability if we're also promising to be innovative? If you want to really be 100% stable, then just don't change anything as long as it works. If you want to be innovative, by definition, you're incurring risk. So we very much have to keep that balance within the company, making sure that while we're changing things, we're 100% rock solid in terms of flawless execution.
So Jennifer, what about your mission statement, and how does that embody your commitment to perform with integrity?
Our mission statement is to help millions of people worldwide experience excellence in healthcare in the comfort of their own homes. Our core values are compassion, reliability, and it's important for excellence, and it's important for us to always be driving that higher standard. You know, the decisions that we make or don't make really do literally impact people's lives. And so we take that very seriously and are always striving to continuously improve.
And Vernon, when I've been to USAA myself, I see the level of transparency that exists in your organization. Tell us a little bit about your mission at USAA and how your program supports that.
So again, the military, we are all about the military and their families. Our core values: loyalty, trust, honesty, service, integrity. So we have themes like we know what it means to serve. We hire a lot of veterans, right? So getting their feedback on a lot of the things we do, because they've been out there, they know what we need to do to provide for them when they're doing what they do best out in the field. So everything we do, from their finances to their, so we have bank products, we have investment products, we have life insurance, we have annuities, anything on the financial front. So keeping all the risks in check, all the compliance, the regulations that are hitting us day in and day out. Being on top of all of that is what we do every day to try to maintain that trust and to provide that protection for their assets and their needs.
Right. And Chris, tell us a little bit about you're tasked with protecting data at the core, I would imagine. How does your mission?
Sure. So in a big picture, what we try to do, and our mission is to create environments for data to thrive. And for many of our parents and for some of us who are a little bit older, we used to worry about the fire in the garage, right? Because we lose our memory. We lose all those memories of the childhood photos and all of those things. Well, today, I think obviously people worry about a fire in the garage, but not always for the same reasons. Now it's the hard drive, it's the flash drive, it's where those memories are kept out there in space. And it's not just, is that going to be around forever, but who's getting access to it? Who's going to use it? Who's going to kind of sneak in and take it from you? And so we take that responsibility very seriously. I work in the ethics and compliance piece of the overall company, and we have to take that mission and really drive it through the entire mission of the company. Otherwise, we won't succeed in ethics and compliance. We really have to tie our GRC program and our ethics program all throughout what the big picture mission of the company is, using data, helping data, analyzing data, and helping the company really work with it.
Chris, can you just tell us a little bit more about the Code of Ethics program? How did it start, and when did you make a decision to use technology really to support your work?
Sure. So the ethics and compliance program at our department, I think a lot of companies respond to something unfortunate happening and investing a whole lot of money in it. We had a pretty forward-looking board who really took it on themselves to say, look, we don't want to ever have a mistake. We knock on wood, we haven't had one, and they wanted to build this program several years ago to really help do better business, because ultimately an ethical business is a better business. Most studies show that the ethical businesses are the more profitable businesses, and they took that to heart. And so it was built up. We now have a very large team throughout the world trying to drive, ultimately, an ability to do the right way and a business to do it. So we embarked about 2.5 years ago to start evaluating technology and how can we use that to really drive this message, because fundamentally, I don't believe technology can drive ethics. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time on technology by itself, but the combination of technology plus people is what can really drive ethics. And so what do I mean by that? I think a lot of departments focus a lot on people. They send out a lot of surveys. They ask them a lot of questions. And they really build and shape their program based on what people tell them. Well, to me, that's missing a huge gap, because there's a lot we don't know, and we might fill out those surveys in a way that are contained by the biases of how we work. On the separate side, technology by itself doesn't work. You can go through all the data analysis you want out of a financial system, and you'll get part of the story. You'll get, where certain money is being spent, and you'll get where round numbers are, and you'll try to find a nice little solution. But if you don't know who the people are, and you don't know where your risky leaders are, you don't get anything there. And so what we embarked on was an ability to start bringing as much of that data into one centralized place as possible. And then it's a longer-term vision, but then the ability to start analyzing that data across the world, across the different segments, across the different solutions, our training data, plus our financial data, plus our IT data, plus our hotline complaints and those types of data. And together, along with surveys as well, and hopefully companies like MetricStream investing even more into data analytics, maybe we'll start doing this right. And that's what we embarked on.
Vernon, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I'm going to echo that, because that's the same on our end, coming from the technology side, people, process, and technology, right? You have to have the people, you have to have the defined processes on the business side in order to be able to even input anything on the technical layer. We can provide technology, you know, very robust technology, but if you don't know what to put in it, or you don't have the high-risk processes, the high-risk, the linkage of relationships between process, risk, and controls, then the technology is just sitting out there. So it's all very key to, again, from that technical side, to maintaining that integrated integrity in the system as a whole.
So Jennifer, what work areas or departments are included in your GRC program?
We actually include all of our departments. So we have pillars that we are committed to. And what we've done is we went through about a 2-year process of building an enterprise risk register. And each one of those pillars has certain risks that they own and they're responsible for. So as we start to formalize more of our governance structure, each one of those functional leads for those pillars own those risks and report up. And then we adjust the risk register based on either external trends, internal trends, what we're seeing from the Medicare, Medicaid changes, things like that.
How many people are involved in your program, approximately?
In our risk program?
Yeah.
So we actually push information all the way down to our field clinicians about how the role that they play in identifying risk and identifying changing condition and all of those things. At our level, our management committee is 10 people, and each one of the management committee members own certain risk, and then we probably have 20 to 25 people across the support sector of the organization that really are involved in the risk register work.
So it's pervasive across the company.
It is. It
It
is.
is.
The home health aide, the people that you wouldn't expect that are closest to the bedside are really the ones that can help identify the risk more readily.
Oh, that's terrific. Terrific. And David, tell us about the 3 lines of defense at DTCC. You have your audit, your program, your first line. How is your program woven in?
Yes, that's right. So we do have the classic 3 lines of defense: audit as a third line, compliance, ORM, et cetera, VRM, TRM as the second line, all the risk units. And then, of course, the business and the people who, the practitioners, if you will, on the ground are the first line of defense. I think the hardest part of that whole setup is engaging the first line of defense. If you think about it, line 2 and line 3, that's their job. The job is to consider risk, worry about it, and plan for it. If you speak to people on what we call the first line of defense, often you realize that they actually have another job, and that is to deliver for the business. They have to make deadlines, they have requirements, et cetera. So the challenge there is making them feel like this is not a distraction from their job, but this is actually very much integral to their job. And one of the things that we've been very successful with is we have actually embedded risk officers on every team in every area within DTCC. So there, perhaps others do the same. We call them PRC specialists, which stands for procedures, risks, and control. And these are people who are actually plucked from that area. So they're well aware of the challenges and the work that area is doing, and they're tasked with understanding the controls and the possible risks of what the area is doing, so that they can kind of help straddle the 2 sides and make sure that the culture within the area and the team is one that just by definition understands and deals with risk as we go.
So it sounds like you and Jennifer both have formalized these roles within your organization.
Absolutely.
And Vernon, you've done that as well, and I think you've added perhaps even another role as you started pushing this down to the first line. Can you tell us about that?
Well, depending on which role you're talking about, yes. So we have all lines of defense work in GRC as well, and I echo a lot of what David was saying is that it's the first line has their other job, right? So again, speaking from the technology, I can lay down the technology platform. Technology means input of some sort. Input means somebody has to input in it, which means that may not be their primary job. But what we're trying to do at USAA is really get that primary focus on compliance across all of our lines of business, all lines of defense, all the way from the bank to the property and casualty to life insurance, standard hierarchy, common taxonomies where everybody, again, where compliance is at the forefront of everything you do, even from an IT standpoint, the architect, the GRC architect role, right? Making sure we are coding for compliance. A lot of people say, well, what does that mean? Well, if you're just coding and you're not aware of the industry that you're in, or you're not aware of the regulations that are touching or impacting you, you're just going to say A plus B equals C. But what if A plus B doesn't always mean equals C in the coding aspect if you're dealing with a financial services product, right? So you have to know, and obviously that's very simplistic, but you have to know the area that you're coding, the product, everything about the regulations, and that's how we've tried to bring it to the forefront of everybody's mind. We will be a compliant company because our members need us to be.
So you talk about being a compliant company, so it sounds like that's pretty very much top-down, and Chris, you mentioned this as well, board of directors down, and then Jennifer, I think you alluded to this as well. But Vernon, what about the governance? What does that look like? What's the ongoing governance to ensure that we expect and get what we...
So governance in the broad sense, we have governance across all the lines of defense, even on the IT side. From the IT side, we have standards and guidelines that we implement that are related to compliance. We have governance at the second line of defense, where we have people approving common taxonomies across all of our lines of businesses, approving or looking over issues or whatever, making sure the risks are input correctly. So all the way up to even to some of the top executive management, they are involved in daily basis from some of the compliance aspects, some of the governance aspects of our whole GRC world.
And David, what about your governance structure?
So a couple of years ago, we established what we call a GRC Council. And all the heads of all the GRC departments, including a few from First Line Defense, are part of the council, which meets bi-monthly, I believe, to try to get an overview of all the risk within the firm. And it's interesting to me because when I first came over to the GRC side, I tried to talk to all my stakeholders and ask them questions about what they do. And very often what they said was, well, from the TRM perspective, this is how the risks and controls are from the ORM perspective. And each one had their very own perspective, which is great because they knew their work very well. But what that can lead to is a kind of a siloing of how we are looking at risk and control. And the idea of the GRC Council is to get everybody in a room to get a bigger across-the-board risk profile and understanding of how all these things work together. And like you said, taxonomy is very important. If each one of the control groups has their own way of defining risk or their own levels of how they measure it, we're never going to get a unified or a standard way of reporting or viewing or dealing with risk. And that's the purpose of the GRC Council.
Yeah.
I'd like to just switch the topic a little bit to external factors, because all of us, live in company or work in companies here that are very much in the public eye, and the roles that you perform are pretty serious. So how do you bring, Jennifer, let me start with you, how do you bring external headline news or external data into your program? What does that process look like?
So we are constantly evaluating external trends, things that we see across the organization, reports that come from the Office of Inspector General, for example, things that we're seeing happen in the industry. And what we do is compare that to any outliers that we have in those areas, and then prioritize the risk based on those things that we know have been a priority from an external perspective that we may have some work to do internally. We also take everything that is a resource for us. There's a lot of reports that come out from different payers, for example, or the Center for Medicare and Medicaid. And again, we look at those compared to our outliers. So we take retroactive data and compare it to our current state.
And Chris, I can't imagine with the cyber headlines that you must think about and deal with on a regular basis, how are you incorporating those kind of events into your program?
Well, I think it just goes to a lot of what Jennifer was saying. A lot of programs spend a lot of time running around doing their own assessment of their own programs, and that's a very important piece, of course. But you've got to keep your eyes open to what's happening around you as well. And so, one key area we're looking at now, and I'm sure others are starting to do as well, but with the growth of privacy rules, how is that going to impact a lot of our programs, right? A lot of our programs, whether it's vendor due diligence and third-party assessments and these things, they get into personal data. They go and they rely on databases full of past criminal conduct and other things. And if you pay attention to privacy laws, those databases are becoming less and less public, more and more able for others and users to control. And we've got to figure out how is that going to impact some of the risks that we might have. How are we going to continue, and we've been doing it for a while, but you always have to look at what's happening to others. How are you looking at your hotline programs in relation to the newer and expanding privacy laws? That's just one example, but you're always going to have to do that analysis, I think, with any program that you're working with, and not just spend time worrying about what your competitors are getting in trouble. Worry about things that are happening in your region, things that are happening to your employees in their region, what pressures are coming because of different things that are happening even in certain economies. As economies struggle in Greece, well, guess what? Risks of compliance in Greece went up for all the companies that were operating in Greece. And if you're not paying attention to that in your program, you ultimately might have more misconduct happening.
One of the areas that there's been some additional research on in the Ponemon Institute has been the increased level of vulnerabilities and threats that are emerging internally. So not just external threats, but employee risk, whether it's, errors or whether acts of omission or purposeful or malicious, or even activities that your employees may engage in and how that can reflect also on your company. It seems to make a lot of news these days. So I'm just wondering if I could ask you to comment a little bit about this. How do you manage this inside risk? Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about that? The
Sure.
people side of it?
Sure. So obviously in the business that we're in, it's all about people. And it's about people that are not in a controlled environment, right? So we have clinicians that we're sending out into individual homes all the time. We don't know what risks are in the home that we may not be aware of. We also don't know what situations our clinicians may be put in. And the other thing that really adds a challenge to the business that we do is we're really starting to see more and more people that have video equipment in their homes that are monitoring when we may not even know that they're monitoring, and snippets taken out of context or not. And so we've been getting a lot more information that way with a picture sent or a video sent. And so I think that helping people to understand the role that they play and how important it is that they're consistent in delivering quality health care all the time, I think is really important. But we have, like I said, we have challenges different in our world even than any other sectors. So as you know, Center for Medicare Medicaid came out and said, hey, we're looking for whistleblowers, and we're going to pay you $1 gazillion to find something wrong that's going on. And so it's an additional challenge that people are actually incentivized to find something. And so we just certainly educate, and we always use lessons learned. So we're very transparent about what we're seeing across the country and even in other countries, because we know that there's relevance to what we're going to see here.
Okay. And Vernon, what about that? How do you kind of manage some of the challenges around risks that can be created by people?
So I'll address that from the standpoint of data as well. So we have, again, because we have such a large variety of products, we have data across the enterprise in numerous databases. So our risk analytics team is growing greatly every day. I think several months ago we were probably 50, or about a year ago we were 50. Now we're over 250 risk analytics folks, right? So they said, hey, we need access to data. Well, what access do you need? Well, all of it, right? So that presents a little bit of a problem, right? Because you just can't give everybody access to all data across enterprise, right? So it's about identifying the risk. What is the risk of giving this person, even though they're in the risk department, right? They have access, or they have the permission and the authority to access data. How do you control that? How do you give them what they need to know, limiting it to what you need to know basis? How do you provision the database so they can get access to critical data elements and non-critical data elements in a controlled environment? Which again gets back to the GRC, documenting the risk and having the controls in place and then testing those controls over time. So that's very key from the data aspect at USAA to minimize that threat.
And I think you also mentioned something to me earlier about separation of duties and code reviews. Can you just talk about that as well?
Yeah, so getting back to the coding for compliance and code reviews, right? So having, and it also ties back into just having that compliance at the front of your brain for everything you're doing, right? So if we're doing a code review, looking for different things where somebody could have, because we have third-party contractors as well that we work with, right? Just making sure that we're on top of every line of code that comes through for our websites, for our products that influence members, making sure that we are on top of keeping that code clean and doing what it's supposed to do, not something else.
David?
Yeah, I would just, I think that's exactly right. For us as well, it's all about the data, the production data, and how it cannot be touched or viewed, et cetera, et cetera. But I was just thinking, I actually do believe that most of the people that work for all of us have integrity, are honest people, and want to do the right thing. Obviously, we need to have controls against the rogue employee, et cetera. But even if someone's trying to do the right thing, they make mistakes. They're in all honest sincerity, people make mistakes, and they have very serious repercussions. And that's why the need for extremely tight control of your data. We have what we call a break glass process, which is that very, very few people can actually see or touch the data. Sometimes it is necessary for a developer to go and try to debug something or help a client. There's a very, very small window with heavy scrutiny and many approvals that have to be gotten before that data is revealed and then quickly closed.
So,
Susan, just to add
Chris.
one more point, very quickly, raise your hand if you know the intimate details of every regulation that applies to your company. No? Oh, almost got one up. Now raise your hand if you don't know the answer to a question, you know to go to somebody within your company to help you. If you get every one of the people in your company to raise your hand to that question, you're going to be 90, 95% of the way. So when we talk about data, and we talk about all of the analytics, and we talk about the controls in place, those are important. But fundamentally, you need to get everyone in your company to raise your hand to that question, because if you get them comfortable to go to people to get the right answer, then you've got the culture you want. You're heading in the right direction. There's going to be those outliers, those handful of percentage that are out there for their own self-benefit. That's what your compliance program, that's what your hotlines, that's what your hiring processes and some of your more strict controls are. But believe it or not, I'll bet you go back to your company right now, and even well-intentioned people don't raise their hand to that second question. And if they don't, that's a great place that you got to spend your time, because we can spend all of our time with all of this data. We can spend all of our time looking at the analytics, which we should, and it's helpful. But if you have 5 hours in a day, 3 to 4 hours of those days should be 3 to 4 of those hours should be spent by somebody out there getting that message out.
I want to add to that also, you mentioned about compliance and the regulations earlier. We have numerous external data, right? So to me, that's what regulations are out there, what's coming, what's changing. We have numerous individuals solely dedicated to reviewing any regulation that impacts USAA, what's coming down the GDPR stuff that's we're all dealing with right now. So again with USAA, even not just in the U.S. regulations, foreign country regulations. So that's a very key part of our daily lives as well.
And I'm just wondering, and Jennifer, I'll start with you, what are some of the new risks that you're thinking about today that perhaps you weren't thinking about last year?
Well, the first I spoke to earlier with the increase in video technology that's out there. That's definitely a risk. We always have, we have security laws obviously around patient information, health information. And so making sure that we control the access to the information, but also allow access where it will benefit the patient, right, for coordination of care and things like that. So that's constantly a juggle. For Bayada in particular, we have a new level of risk. We are making a move from our current structure, which is a privately held company owned by one sole individual, Mark Bayada, and we are transitioning to not-for-profit. So it's a huge, huge change. There's really nowhere that we can see an example of anybody that's done this in healthcare. So we have weekly steering committee meetings, and obviously the risk associated with that transition are phenomenal. So that's our biggest challenge this year.
Okay. And David, what kind of risks are you thinking about now that maybe last year weren't on the risk assessment form?
Right, sure. The obvious ones are, let's say, cloud, where everybody wants to put their code in the cloud. The risk profile of the cloud is very different than when you host your own code and you're the master of everything in front of you. This is sending things out the door. Whether we want to say it or not, cloud hosts are just third-party vendors with a fancy name. So we have to make sure that we understand how to test software, how to protect data in the cloud. That's something we hadn't thought about before. We also use FOSS software, which means free open source software. This means other people are writing code that's going to be embedded in our code. We have to be very, very careful it makes a lot of business sense to use that. It saves money, it moves your project along faster, but we do have teams that are dedicated to make sure that code is safe for us to use in every way.
Vernon?
Yeah, that's exactly the same with us too, because we have this large effort to move our GRC platform off of the on-premise hardware into the what I call software as a service form of a cloud, right? What that allows us to do from a culture standpoint, getting all the way back to that topic, is it allows us to focus on the members and what we need to do for the members and let a vendor take care of their product, do the upgrades, do the patches, do the maintenance, right? At that point, we're just a consumer of that product, using that product to do what we need to do to support our members. And with that cloud, to your point specifically, is a whole new layer of security and risk that you have to plan for. Even the technical risk of, our members are on the line, they need to get online immediately to figure out a life insurance product or whatever. And again, in general, you have a latency because now you have to go miles to another cloud vendor. So there's a lot of availability issues you got to think about from a technical standpoint. So,
and Chris, what about you?
Layer.
What's new on your horizon?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those things are definitely there. I mean, I'd say probably one of the biggest risks is the risk of falling behind. Right now, technology is going so fast in the data world. We're going to blink, and before we know it, cars are driving us, and data is at our fingertip. Things that we've been begging for in our industry for years are now going to be at our fingertips, in a matter of months or a year. And so my fear, and it goes to some extent to some of these places, obviously on the data security and the privacy side, is keeping up with the technology that's allowing people to really come in and do what they want with your systems. But at the same time, making sure that we stay on top of automation and analytics in a way that we can really focus on the right things that we've talked about already and not get distracted by a lot of the anomalies out there.
So I think before we open it up to the floor for questions, each of these panelists is clearly passionate about what they're doing. And I'm just wondering if maybe each of you could just take a moment and tell us, what inspires you, in your day-to-day job. And we'll just go right down. David, do you want to start?
Sure. I like what DTCC does. I like the feeling that the buck stops here and that decisions and things that we do and code that we write has a real effect on many, many people, and that we have to do it right. I like to add value, so when I feel like I spent a lot of time on the first line of defense, if you will, and understanding risk from that perspective, And now I support the second and third lines that have a different idea or a different purview of what that means. The ability to make everybody understand why this is important and what the other one's view is a place where I feel like I can add value. So that's something I'm very passionate about.
Jennifer, what inspires you?
You know, I think all of us, myself included, or the majority of us, have been impacted by some kind of error or lack of quality health care. And I think for me, the importance of doing the right thing every time when we're caring for people at the most vulnerable point in their lives makes a difference in their quality of life. And ultimately, if we get it right, should change the healthcare delivery system for our country, which we all know needs to be changed, and allow us to, instead of the hospital at the middle deciding when somebody needs home care or when somebody needs rehab or whatever, have the patient actually at the middle in their home deciding when they need a hospital stay, when they need a rehab stay. So that's what gets me excited, impacting people's lives for the better.
Vernon?
As far as USAA is concerned, I mean, supporting the member is the biggest honor you could have, in my opinion. They're out there doing what they do to protect us. So us being able to return that favor back to them and take some of the burden off of them from their financial assets is just a great privilege. Personally, I came real close to joining the military. Last week, I wasn't able to make it. So to be able to turn that around and still do that today is a great personal goal.
So a number of years ago, I was sitting in a conference room, which I'm sure we've all spent a lot of time in, and I invited a 32-year-old gentleman into the room. And I was talking to him. He had just gotten married about a year prior. He had a 3-month-old baby. And I was talking to him about a project he did, a project that was going to be really good and profitable for the company. A project that he went to his manager for, and his manager approved it, and a project that he went to the lawyers for, and the lawyers drafted the agreement. That very agreement was the agreement I was sitting to talk to him about. That was the reason the regulator was filing criminal charges against him. So again, he went to his manager, got approval. It was good for the company. He went to legal, and legal helped him do it, and he was being criminally charged. That was the day that got me into this mess of compliance, where I realized I don't want anyone I work with to ever be in that situation. The reason he was in that situation, he did something that if any of you know antitrust laws, you know you're not supposed to do. He sat down with a group of competitors, and he decided that nobody was going to do business in one part of the region anymore. Simple, basic antitrust law. He worked for a large company. He should have known better. His manager should know better, and for goodness sakes, the lawyer should have known better. But what that reminds me every day is that it's our people that are on the front lines. We can get cynical, we can get frustrated, we can get upset that when they're trying to do their business, that they're not doing exactly the procedure we've set out for them. But ultimately, their butts are on the line every day. And so my job's there to try to make sure that when their butt's on the line, they think about their families, they think about their future, and they realize that it's just not worth it for a few extra dollars. That's what keeps me up, and I get to tell my kids my whole job is to help people do the right thing. So I can't complain.
Great, thank you. So I think we're going to open it up for a few questions. I'll go ahead, Risa, do you? Do you have any questions? Yep, here we go.
Hi, this question is for Vernon. Vernon, I'm a lifelong loyal USAA member. And my question is, 20 plus years ago, USAA made huge investments in automation. How do you, or can you share any lessons learned relative to testing your automated controls?
Could you repeat that question? It cut out a bit.
I'm glad
Sure.
I was the only one. I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. I can't.
I don't know, it keeps cutting out, and I'm in the back of the
Automated
room.
controls, I heard that part.
Yes, can you share any lessons learned on how you test and manage your automated controls?
We're getting every second word you say. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Automated.
So, okay, so so I guess the question is about what do we do for automated controls? How do we manage automated controls?
Yeah, let's learn on auditing automated controls. So on auditing.
Auditing, okay, so that's probably more of a business question. And I have a business partner that can help me out here. Yeah, Sabrina, it's you.
So the USAA Audit Department has a specialized team that deals with IT, and within that IT group, we have a team that deals with automated controls. They're all IT professionals, and they're doing nothing else but evaluate those controls. So I hope that's the answer to your question.
I think one of the things that I've noticed, with some of the companies, I mean, I've been on site both at USAA and at DTCC. Jennifer, I haven't been to your shop, or Chris to yours, but the pervasiveness of the GRC mission is just so apparent with everyone. And, you both gave us the opportunity to hear about how you instill that in Jennifer and your folks and Chris and your folks. And I would say that that's the one, one thing I would ask all of you to think about is how many of your employees can you talk to? Don't use GRC as the question, but that they really think about this as part of how they operate every day. And I think that is really, what it takes to get to this next level of performing with integrity, where it's really woven into your operations and your organization so profoundly that it doesn't feel like it's additive anymore. It's just how you operate.
Yeah, that's key, the adoption, getting people to adopt the process, the technology, which gets back into the user experience, the interface. So absolutely key to getting everybody on board.
Do we have another question out here? Yes, okay, I see it's coming.
I hope it doesn't cut out. Are any of you starting to think about using...
I think we're going to get rid of that microphone. Yeah.
Just
Are any of you starting to consider using artificial intelligence or robo?
Okay, I think the question is,
So I wouldn't go so far to say we're at artificial intelligence, unfortunately. Although we are exploring a little bit the sort of robo responses to basic compliance questions, and being able to make sure our employees have a simple response there. I think in the GRC space, we are trying to automate our background due diligence on third parties. Now, I'll never use an automated decision-making to say no to a third party, but certainly there is an inordinate amount of time that our teams have used to go through very basic criteria for every third-party onboarding. And so one of our big initiatives actually with MetricStream is to be trying to automate and pull our third parties into MetricStream, running back-end due diligence, giving approval scores for the easy yeses, and then really have our team focus on those that are a true risk.
Vernon, were you going to add something?
Yeah, same here. We are dabbling in the robotic process automation to a certain level, but we're also looking at machine learning and natural language processing to some extent to try to help us interpret regulations, kind of do that initial scan and initial peer into the regulation, and possibly even triage. That's a little bit more difficult than it sounds. Because it does, in order to be able to fully use it, it requires a mapping, a full mapping of some sort of all your GRC controls in your libraries. But we are going there.
We have automated process, a robotic process in our home pharmacy, packaging the medications, checking them for quality, checking for drug-drug interaction adverse effects. And then on the documentation side, one of the things we're doing similar to what you said is we have a search that runs in the background for everything that a clinician or anybody else documents looking for hot words or anything that would elevate a risk or highlight a risk.
But I will just to kind of add to that point, and I think it's something I think that the industry needs to start thinking about. I mean, if you really think about so many different industries and the bias that pervades them, you realize that when we use our own search terms and we think about things, we're all doing it with a particular bias. And when we can get technology to start shifting through that bias and actually running across the data in a way that we're not directing it to make a link between X and Y, it's making the links itself, and we sort of eliminate the bias that we have in there, I think we're going to get smarter. And you always have to do it a combination with everything else, but it's certainly an area that I hope to see more companies invest in, because it's quite important and quite critical, I think, to getting better.
Right. I think the predictive bias that you refer to, Chris, is the human reaction that people have to the latest bit of information that is in their brain. It could be a headline news, it could be a story, it could be a personal experience, so that influence on qualitative risk assessments and predictive bias is really quite aligned, which is why this quantitative risk assessment process of piping in data is so important. The qualitative still matters. It gives you management's view of the future, but there has to be a combination of both without question.
Yeah, and we had, actually at our company, we had a gentleman by the name of DJ Patel come and talk to us not too long ago. And for those who don't know DJ Patel, he was the first ever U.S., I think, data scientist. He was appointed in the Obama administration. And he talked about just one simple story about a program that he worked on where I think it was a 14-year-old girl had written a program to sit on top of a police database and try to assess the real causes for police abuse, those who attacked police. And he said it was amazing. The police officers all listed out the 7 different criteria that they were certain was the cause for why people assaulted police officers. And when this data went on top of their database, they realized that sure, 4 of those 7 were right, but 3 of them were way off, and there were 5 other actual causes. And I don't remember all the causes, but that's what I mean when I'm talking about there's some bias built into all of our systems. And I think true artificial intelligence, true kind of data science, once it gets more advanced, I think can help us. You know, we're talking Mars and beyond, but hopefully not so far.
Great. Okay, I think with that, I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you, David and Jennifer, Vernon, Chris, for joining us. Very insightful.